Welcome to Information Literacy Workshops with CTAP Region 4, your source for free professional development designed to support your classroom. This Deep Questions series covers specific strategies to help you and your students learn to ask great questions. This segment shows you how to identify big questions.
In the segment on big questions, we explained the importance of defining what makes a question a big question. Once you've decided on a definition, where do you go from there? Now that your students have brainstormed some questions for research, how do you help them figure out if the questions are big or not?
We suggest that you approach this in 2 steps. The first step is to teach students how to identify if a question is big or not. The second is to provide some guided practice.
So, let's talk about the first step. You can decide which teaching methods match the needs of your students. Here are a few examples we've used. Could you present a few slides with a definition of a big question and hold a class discussion? Sure, this is direct instruction. Tell students what the working definition is, model an example or two, and check for understanding. What would a constructivist method look like? How about creating a small group activity with sample questions and ask students to categorize them? Create a set of sentence strips with questions. Some questions should match the definition of a big question and others should not. Students work in teams to put the questions into groups. They come up with their own categories for these groups of questions.
I suppose you're asking yourself, how do students know what a big question is? I haven't given them a definition. Now you have 2 options. First, students can compare their categories with the working definition the teacher developed, or students can use the categories they made to develop their own definition of a big question. Then students cross-check their definition with other teams in the room to develop a class definition. Students create the working definition of a big question in this sort of activity. Teach this any way you like, but students should come away knowing how to identify big questions.
So, you students have a working definition of a big question, but they still need some practice. Here's an activity you can do with students to help them practice and let you check their understanding of big questions. Create some more questions for students to practice with. Some questions should and some questions should not follow the definition. Let's look at a sample of practice questions about the Mayans. We want to apply our class definition to this set of questions. Students identify which questions are big and which ones are not. But the most important part of this exercise for students is to explain why. When they can explain their reasoning, they get a chance to cement their learning.
Thanks for listening. In our next segment, we'll explain how to use a student favorite called the question machine. Until then, remember, questions are at the heart of learning.